Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Of course, you posed a very interesting question for Forbes. It is, how much money has Michael Cohen made hating on Trump? First, give us the background here. Can you tell us who Michael Cohen is for those who might forget?
Sure. Michael Cohen is Donald Trump's former fixer. It was pretty well known around media circles and Trump world as being pretty aggressive at defending Donald Trump. He would be the person to call you if you were a journalist and wrote an unflattering story. And then he testified before Congress and perjured himself, admitted that, went to jail, came back, and essentially flipped on Donald Trump after the former president did not really pick up his legal fees, which Cohen was expecting. So ever since then, he has been a hardcore anti-Trumper.
So did things go south in the relationship just because Trump didn't pick up his legal fees, or did Michael Cohen have a change of heart? What does that look like?
It depends who you're talking to. Michael Cohen will definitely say that it's a change of heart and that he realized what he was doing is wrong, and that may or may not be correct. But the moment that did seem to trigger this was that Cohen thought he would be taken care of in a way that he was not.
And now, fast forward to just last week, Michael Cohen and Donald Trump were in the same courtroom. Can you give us the flavor of what that looked like, and why did Michael Cohen testify against Donald Trump?
Sure, they were face to face in New York in the Attorney General's case against Donald Trump for inflating his property values on filings, and Cohen was there to testify to his role in doing it, and what he knew about Donald Trump's involvement in the project. So, it was pretty interesting stuff there with Cohen on the stand. And Cohen was one of the few people who could actually see Donald Trump's face during his testimony, because Trump was in the courtroom at the time. But only the judge and I guess it was a clerk and Cohen were the ones looking back at Trump. So he certainly had a unique perspective of the show.
So let's get to the question at hand. How much money has Michael Cohen made hating on Trump? What's the number?
Well, spent a lot of time looking at stuff. The best estimate we can have is based on his book sales alone. The figure is more than $1 million. It appears to be. So we went back, we figured out what his book sales were from a company called Circana Bookscan, which tracks all that stuff, kind of like Nielsen does with TV. And his first book, which was a New York Times bestseller, debuted at #1 and spent 4 weeks on the chart, sold 290,000 print copies, which is a very, very good run. And then the second one, which also hit the New York Times bestseller list, sold about 23,600 copies. So solid. Going back through those numbers, looking at what the cost of the book is, and just standard, book contract stuff, we figured it would be about $1 million if it was a standard contract. That also includes, audiobooks and ebooks, which were not factored into those numbers that I just rattled off, but were certainly decent sellers for him. The caveat to all that is we don't know the details of Cohen's contract. He would not share it with us. He told us our number was wrong. He did not say whether it was high or low, but he definitely pushed back. It's kind of like the old Michael Cohen back when he used to be pushing back on bad press about Donald Trump. For whatever reason, it seems like he did not want this number out there. And his book publisher, while they said to Publishers Weekly several years ago that Cohen had a non-traditional contract, they would not give us any details whatsoever about what that contract was this time out. So, it does look to be that he's doing pretty well. And then books are just one revenue stream that he has coming out of his anti-Trump anti-Trump business.
I do want to talk about the additional revenue streams, but what were these books about?
Sure. The first one, Disloyal, a memoir. It was the true story of the former personal attorney to Donald J. Trump. It was written actually while Cohen was under house arrest. And if you remember, he was released to house arrest due to COVID, but then he was put back in jail, largely because it looked like he might be violent. The Trump Department of Justice was arguing that this was violating terms of his release. He ended up getting cleared and was able to publish it. The second book, Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the Department of Justice Against His Critics, obviously goes back and looks at some of the difficulties that Cohen had getting that first book out.
And let's talk about the additional revenue streams. He has a podcast. Tell us about that. Is it successful?
I think it's incredibly successful since, especially the episode that had me on it. But no, overall it is doing pretty well. It's released 350 episodes, which is, certainly a really good run for a podcast. And it's amongst the Chartable, which is a rating service owned by Spotify, ranked amongst the top 350 podcasts in the United States, which, at first may not sound all that impressive, but when you think of just the sheer volume of podcasts out there, all the stuff from the New York Times, This American Life, all this stuff that's just constantly, Joe Rogan, that's going to constantly be at the top of the charts. 350 from Michael Cohen, I think, is a very respectable ranking there.
Whenever we talk about Michael Cohen, it's really interesting because you said earlier he did perjure himself on the stand before, and now he's had that change of heart. He's written 2 anti-Trump books. He has that podcast. Is he a reliable witness here?
Based on the testimony he gave last week in the New York Attorney General's trial, no. They walked out of that, and Trump's team walked out of that and was very happy with their cross-examination of Cohen. They kind of caught him on all sorts of little problems there. And, I highly recommend going back and reading Dan Alexander, my editor at Forbes, his analysis of it. He was in the courtroom, and the articles are up there on Forbes, as well as Allison Durkee here at Forbes, who's also been covering it. Cohen has proven not to be a great witness on the stand. I don't think it's really going to matter that much in this trial, because the crux of the New York Attorney General's argument is in documents. Michael Cohen was there to kind of give voice to what the documents said, but there's all sorts of financial documents, internal emails, and that's really, I think, the evidence that's going to matter the most for the judge.
Michael Cohen was disbarred. Michael Cohen owes a lot in legal fees. Is hating on Trump going to be lucrative long term? I mean, how much juice is left to squeeze out of this?
Well, hey, still squeezing it out. I mean, he's 350th, in podcast. I thought I'm the worst person to answer this. Shortly after January 6th, I was on a podcast with several other reporters who were focused on the Trump organization, and we all said Trump's done. Nothing's happening. He's done. He's toxic. No one's going to do business with him. And here we are over 2 years later, and Trump's still chugging along. Got his, I think we valued him at about $2.6 billion recently. He's the leading contender for the Republican Party, so presidential nomination. So this is a little business for Michael Cohen that could go on for quite some time.
And here we are first thing on a Monday morning talking about him. And I do want to talk about now, looking into the future, what other legal disputes are both Trump and Michael Cohen involved in together?
Well, they've had a few, and they seem to have largely cooled off of late. Trump sued Michael Cohen alleging for $500 million, alleging that Cohen had violated the attorney-client relationship, in part because of these books. Trump earlier this month dropped the charges, but did reserve his right to refile them. There certainly were some, even though Cohen, the charges were the complaint against him was dropped, it wasn't. He still had to pay for 5 attorneys for several months worth of work, so that was not a cheap one. Cohen had sued Trump, arguing that in the Department of Justice, arguing that his imprisonment was unconstitutional, and I believe they ended up. I believe he did reach a settlement with Trump over that one. The money he was asking was significantly less than $500 million, and it seems likely that Cohen's going to be called in to testify in any other cases involving Trump's business. So though they may not want to rely on him too much, given how weak he was on the stand last week.
And when it comes to his professional life, is there anything he's working on right now that you know of?
That's a great question. He's regularly on CNN. You regularly see him there. I don't believe he's paid for that. I think that's just, he goes on to bring attention to himself and his story and his other products. But I'm not sure. Like I said, he was responded to my inquiries via text last week and was, did not want us to report on this sort of information, didn't direct me in any other places, but I haven't seen his name come up for other revenue streams. It seems safe to say he's probably out of the taxi medallion business, having had legal problems with that years ago. So that's an excellent question.
Zach Everson, per usual, thank you for joining me. Thanks for your reporting.
Per usual, my pleasure.